Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits. Last spring I set up an indigo vat and filmed, and I've already shared a bunch of videos from those projects. But there's another one I want to share today where I wanted to try dip dyeing yarn into the vat to see if I could create a variegated yarn by submerging just a portion of the yarn in the vat at a time. Indigo is a really fun pigment to dye with. I will include these videos in my natural dyeing playlist because the techniques works really similarly whether you are doing plant extracted indigo or if you're using a chemically synthesized indigo, it's the same molecule. Indigo is this deep blue color that we're all very familiar with because it's used for denim. But the blue pigments are not soluble in water. And so without being able to dissolve them in water, you can't dye fibers. So you have to chemically reduce the indigo into a reduced form, which shifts the color of the indigo from blue to green. And so when you set up this vat, we have a large container where we can limit the exposure of the pigments to oxygen to prevent the re-oxidation when the green pigments will shift back to blue. And so to dye the yarn, we'll be submerging our yarn in this vat and then removing it and watch those colors shift. And so it's so much fun because it feels a little bit like magic, but really it's science. So let me now show you how I set up the vat using a Jacquard Indigo kit. The Jacquard Indigo tie-dye kit has all of the chemicals that you need to get started on your hydrosulfite vat. This vat is really great for dyeing cotton and other plant-based fibers. In addition to the kit, I recommend that you get a good pair of gloves that goes up to about your elbow. That's really handy because it allows you to submerge your hands into the vat further. Since we are going to be mixing some dye powders, I will be wearing a respirator mask or N95 mask while I am dissolving the dye powders into our vat. And I will be wearing safety glasses throughout the entire process. You're going to want a 5-gallon bucket with a tight fitting lid, a stick or some kind of stirring stick that can reach to the bottom of your 5-gallon bucket and scrape the sides. And then you'll want some various other containers to have on hand for while your yarn is oxidizing. All of the tools and equipment are dedicated for dyeing yarn and not used for the preparation of food. Other helpful but optional items include a hose nearby and a kettle if you want to warm up your water to help you dissolve your various powders. To set up the indigo vat, I filled my 5-gallon bucket about 2/3 of the way with water, and I added a little bit of hot water to warm things up a little bit. Then I dissolved 100 grams of soda ash in some hot water, added it to our vat and stirred. 50 grams of the reducing agent, the sodium hydrosulfite, I dissolved that in hot water, added it to the bucket, and then attempted to suspend or paste 20 grams of the pre-reduced indigo dye. But as you can see, it's not dissolving. That's why we need to reduce it. But I did at least get a lot of it wet before transferring that to the vat. And you can see that very quickly things started to turn green. I stirred everything in one direction, trying not to splash a lot, and then removed the stir stick, put the cover on, and let everything settle for 30 minutes to an hour before getting started. If you want more details on how I set up the indigo vat, go and watch Dyepot Weekly 528 for a longer form of this summary. The instructions are contained within the indigo tie-dye kit, but you can also download those for free on Jacquard Products website, so that way you can see what they recommend that you have on hand. Today, rather than doing a resist dye or sort of a more all-over tonal dye on our yarn, I would like to attempt to dip dye the yarn. This yarn is Knit Picks Simply Cotton Fingering Weight yarn, and it is 100% organic cotton. Now my plan is to, with our vat, I'm going to dip dye the yarn. Normally you completely submerge the yarn and sort of squeeze it underneath the surface where you can't see on camera. But what I want to try to do is insert part of the yarn, keeping the rest out of the bucket, squeeze, remove it, let this area oxidize, And then I'll go and dip a little bit more and repeat. And so I'm hoping that we'll get one area with lighter indigo and one area with deeper indigo. And I don't know if this will work, but we're gonna give it a shot. Before I pre-soak this yarn overnight, I'm gonna add on a brand new removable nylon zip tie, so that way I'll be able to keep sort of a hand on this as I'm dipping or whatever I need to do. But I'm gonna pre-soak this in some plain tap water overnight, so that way tomorrow when I set up the vat, we'll be ready to go. I had set up my indigo vat about a week before dyeing the project that I'm about to show you. And so I just needed to quickly reset the vat to make sure that the indigo was still reduced, it was still green, so that way we know it would be ready to go. Let me show you how I reset it. We're about a week later. These gloves go up to my elbow. The good news, things are still looking green. Okay, I'm stirring it in one direction. We're going clockwise. And then I'm gonna drag it the other direction, pull the stick out. I see tons of particles floating around in there beneath the surface, which I'm sure you can't see, but I think that's the reason why now that I've stirred things up, we want to wait 30 minutes before I come and add anything into it, because we don't want those insoluble particles to get over anything. But yeah, we'll come back in 30 minutes or so. My vat still looked green, which meant that the indigo was still reduced and ready to dye our yarn. But if it looked blue and you didn't really see green anymore, you could add more of the reducing agent, the sodium hydrosulfite, and you can stir and wait, just like setting it up at the beginning, until things shift green again. But now let's finally go and start dyeing our yarn. And I'm filming a lot of different projects at once, so shifting back and forth between them, so hopefully it's not too choppy. Okay, everyone, it's been a big afternoon of dyeing here with my indigo vat. But I want to try something now that is new and a little different. And we're going to see how this works. Because I'm going to try to keep one hand out of the vat. I'm looping the yarn kind of around it. And we're going to attempt to partially submerge the skein. So we're going to see how this goes. And we're partially submerged. This is not easy to keep a hand on it and to squeeze it with only one hand. And I can't really squeeze as I remove. This is the most we've had come out with us in a long time. Mainly because one hand I wasn't able to use, but we dipped part of it in. And that kind of worked. I need to let this oxidize before we can come back to it, but I'm gonna go set it aside in a pan. There's definitely staining on parts, but oh my gosh, I really can't tell how in or out of focus I am. But we definitely got a good green area, and so next we'll try to dip a bit more. Oh my gosh, if this works, that's so cool. I'm gonna let that sit for 10 minutes or so. We're still a little bit greenish here on this dip dyed skein, and if I flip it over, then you'll really see that we still have some of that green in there. Indigo is such a cool dye because it can only bind to your yarn, and it's only soluble if it's reduced, if it's in that green stage. Once it oxidizes and becomes blue, it's no longer soluble, I think. I think that that's part of it. And that's part of why you can't dye with it when it's in the oxidized state, because you need it to be reduced for it to work. But it is interesting that as I've been doing multiple dips on different things, it does feel like things happen faster the more dips you do, but I think that's just because there's more blue in there already that it's harder to see that green. So I think in theory you do want to make sure you wait multiple dips. I'm getting my gloves on ready to dip dye our second time, and I think it's just so cool that this is working. I'm a little hesitant about how much of a mess this is gonna be to wash. I'm not looking forward to that part, but let's open this up and good, we're nice and green. I'm just trying to move some of this debris to the side. Okay, so I have the dip dyed skein and I'll stick that end in there so you can see my hand. Okay, and I'm gonna just go around twice this time to try to keep this up, and I'm gonna squeeze out this end finally, which I guess I did not do last time. Probably also why it took so long to oxidize. And making sure I have more yarn here this time. Let's go in again. And as I'm doing this, I'm mostly swirling versus squeezing because I can't really squeeze. It's hard to do with one hand. Oh my gosh. But we definitely have more yarn in, I think. All right, let's remove it over to here and let's squeeze it now. Knowing that this could add transfer up to the other side. But let me bring us over because we definitely have deeper, lighter, and then presumably we'll have something more pastel. Because once this finishes oxidizing, then I can bring the whole thing, I can add the whole thing in, and we can finally get color everywhere. Okay, I've got our dip dyed colorway back over here. We've got a little bit of area that's still fairly green. I'm trying to move the yarn so that way it can oxidize. Maybe I should pop it in here just to let that last little bit oxidize. And while I wait, may as well cover this up because I think this is the last thing I'm doing today. Yeah, no point in rushing things, Rebecca. Let's be patient and turn off the camera. Maybe because it's the end of the day and I'm getting a little impatient, but it looks good. We're gonna go for it. I think the downside of not having something completely oxidized before going in again is that you can let's squeeze and go in, and I'll keep talking. Not that you can see what I'm doing down here, but I think that the downside of not being completely oxidized before going back in is that I don't think you'd be able to layer on more dye. Now, things are pretty crumpled up. I'm trying to loosen it and gently move it without introducing air, which is easier said than done. Oh man, okay. We're gonna attempt to bring it all in, give it a nice big squeeze and up. Let's let it drip over here. Actually, what we're gonna do, because we're done for the day now, we're gonna pop the cover on, bring this guy over. And I know we can drip more, and the zip tie is at a weird spot. Let's see. But you guys, I think, and it's gonna be hard to see what it's gonna look like now because it's still so green. We definitely have a variegated colorway here, and I'm very happy about that. Very, very happy. But oh man, I'm gonna need to start cleaning up. And I have a bucket of water near me before I get my hose, but one of the first things I wanna do is rinse this excess dye gunk off the outside of my gloves. Best I can. So then we can get ready to start trying to spray things down. But as for this, we're gonna wait. This looks so cool. It definitely worked. Oh, we have more area that needs to oxidize. That is fine. I can be patient, and this will probably be the last guy that I go ahead and wash, as I think a helicopter is going overhead. That's exciting. But anyway, I'm gonna leave this to sit, and eventually we'll come to rinse things, I guess. But for now, I'm just gonna be patient and hope it doesn't start to rain, because I feel like I already have a big mess out here. Oh man. The biggest downside of working with indigo is, unfortunately, the washing. I started off spraying the yarn with my hose over a bucket, and then moved to soaking the yarn in water, squeeze and release to try to loosen and remove as much of the unbound indigo as I possibly could. After rinsing off all the unbound indigo, the color should be very, very color fast. Indigo is again, a natural based molecule that lasts for centuries. Some of the oldest dyed fabrics that have been discovered were dyed with indigo. It's really remarkable that people figured out how to do this so long ago. But this is another reason why pre-washed denim is popular, because non-pre-washed denim can bleed a little bit those first few washes. Eventually, I shifted indoors to my sink and washed with soap using warm water, just trying to really rinse out all of that color and really just waiting for the water to run clear. Now, if this was fabric, I would put it in my washing machine after doing a bulk rinse outdoors, but with yarn, you can put it in a wash bag and sort of secure it with some rubber bands if you really want to, but it's not that necessary. And I'm thrilled to say that by the time I put this yarn in my spin dryer, the water that I was spinning out was clear. So we're good to go. So now let's go look at the finished yarn. I am so excited for this quote dip dyed project, where I dipped the yarn into my Indigo Vat 3 different times, submerging a little more or a little less each time. I'm now forgetting which direction I went. Either should work. But I think that because I don't know if, as you absorb dye, if you get less and less in the dye bath over time, I probably started doing a little bit and then in the end submerged everything. But anyway, I am impressed that we don't have smudges along the areas where I had things submerged. Things aren't perfectly even, like we have a light patch over there, but I don't see like dark staining because some of the smudge on the surface got on the yarn and stained it. I'm not seeing any indication of anything like that. I'm just seeing beautiful imperfections from a hand-dyed yarn. And so I'm super, super excited with how this one came out, because this was a lot easier than I had originally anticipated. This skein here was one of the last projects that I worked on with my Indigo Vat on a big day of dyeing yarn. And so we had 1, 2, and 3 dips. But see, this skein here is the first skein I dyed with just 1 dip. And that's almost the deepest color. And I think the reason why the light color is much lighter isn't because, it could be because of everything else I've dyed in the vat, but I think it's more likely to be because I didn't have things submerged for as long. The very first skein I kept submerged for over a minute. And I think that if I went back, and editing Rebecca is not gonna go and calculate the amount of time I was actually submerged in the vat, but had we done that, that could have been helpful. I could have tagged things on my phone. Absolutely, I could have done that. But there's some issues as well, because my gloved hands were very indigo-y, and I really did not want to touch my phone with my indigo covered hands, or gloves, really, gloves, not hands. And so I feel like I want a timer, a battery operated timer or countdown clock, so that way I can look and see, okay, this is how many minutes and seconds it is when I start, so I know I can either track in my head for about a minute, or I don't know, have something that I can start and stop with my foot. That would be ideal. So if you have any recommendations, I know you can't add the links easily to the video description, but leave a comment with the type of timer that you recommend. One other thing I've thought about during this project is that I think a lot of people refer to dip dyeing or dip dyed as something similar to what I did here today, where you submerge something, let it stay there for a while, and then resubmerge and resubmerge. But when I think about dip dyeing, I think about raising and lowering continuously, sort of dipping in and out to concentrate the color at one end. And both are technically correct. I think it's just conventionally, there's one I do more than the other. I have one final indigo dyeing project that I filmed with that original vat, and hopefully I'll edit and share it before I set up another vat in spring, summer 2025. But that project is something I've done once before, and I'm not gonna say more because in the pre-soaking footage you can kind of get a big hint of what that project is. Please let me know what other kinds of indigo projects you would like to see. I ended up getting injured a little bit after filming those videos, and so I was not able to do more projects last summer like I had intended, but I have plans to, in a very back safe way, play around with this more next year. I'm gonna have the buckets raised on like a table so that way I don't have to bend. But please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. As for ChemKnits announcements, Hanukkah is starting soon. The first night of Hanukkah is December 25th, and every night of Hanukkah, plus a few nights after, there will be a new yarn dyeing video. And you can also order a yarn sampler where you can get a wrapped mini skein of yarn that corresponds to each night so you can open up while you're watching the video. Now I have some samplers left in the shop. You can find a link to them down in the video description or head over to the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I love to play around with all different types of way of dyeing yarn, and I don't know, I'm so excited. I really want to try, and I'd even pulled some tank tops for me. I want to do some folding shibori techniques with the Indigo Vat because I think I would love wearing those tanks all the time. Like a ribbed tank top is like part of my usual dyeing uniform, and I would totally use something hand dyed and wear that. So that is absolutely on my Indigo list. But again, let me know what other things you would like to see. Thank you so much for watching.